Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be covering Python functions, right? Well, let's get started. What is Python function? Firstly, we need to understand about programming and some essential concepts. The key to programming is abstraction. Here's a definition from Wikipedia, but if that definition is a little bit strange to you, what we want to do is create some abstract concept that carries out the procedure that you define, and we can apply this to different inputs to the function, right? So naming a concept is a key part of abstraction. We need to know what we want to call it. You can think it like as a production line where it just continuously do what it's set out to do. So if it's a cookie production line, cutting a tree-shaped one, whatever the input you give, whether it will be a dough or anything else like metal sheets or rubbers, whatever, it will try to print out the same thing. So it's just going to do the same thing, and it's up to the user to define what type of input you want to give it to and determine what it should be doing with different interactions to it. So here's an example. Hey, I often need to multiply a number by itself. I know, let's call that squaring a number, right? In this instance, it makes sense because you're just multiplying the number by itself, and that essentially is a squaring a number, right? So we can call it a squaring or square function, right? So in Python, functions are used for abstracting common procedures. So you have a lot of operations you want to carry out, then we can group this together and put it as a function. So how do we use functions? Well, using function is pretty easy. What you have to do is just pass in an appropriate parameters, the input parameters, and it will do its own thing and returns the results for you. So here, a function round, x is a variable, returns the nearest int to the float value x. So we have seen the use of round function before. Let's have a look at it again. Let's clear this. So here, round function takes some number, but if I don't give a number, it's going to complain. Here it says built-in name error, name x is not defined, right? Because it's thinking x is a variable. So let's give some number, some random big number. It's going to return me 6. Okay, so we call it returns because it's going to do its own procedure within the function, and the final value is output to us, and we call that it returns. So here is another example, round 12.3. Round is the name of the function, and 12.3 is the argument, also the input parameter, and we can use this function in the expression as well. Okay, so here we can do round 4.4 plus 3. So in this instance, what's going to do is think function as a bracket. Function in itself is a bracket, so it's going to evaluate the function first and then grab the value that it returned to you and then use it in the expression. So in this instance, we have round 4.4. It's going to round it to 4 and then add 3. So the return value should be 7. Okay. And such as the round, there are some other inbuilt functions that are quite useful, such as absolute values, ints, floats. You will see much later things like the length, max, min. All those are some of the inbuilt functions, some of the built-in functions that you can use in Python, right? We will cover more of those as we progress on. So what if we want to create our own function to do a set of procedures that we define, right? So you can always define your own functions quite easily by using the definition. So you have seen this before up here, def main, and then it's going to do something, right? So here we're going to do the same thing for this square function, def square x. Okay, and in Python, whenever you start a definition and the set of instructions you want to put inside the definition, you need to give it an indentation. Typically, it's a 4 spaces, but make sure it's consistent. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then return x times x. Okay, and in the shell, you just press enter again. Okay, now I have created a function called square. Right, so I can check the locals. If you are unfamiliar with locals, please see the previous video of the basics. Right. So here I have a bunch of variables that I have created in the previous video, but now I also have this square. So now square name is inside my dictionary, and it's saved as a function in this particular location. Basically what it's saying is, go to this location in the memory, then you will find this set of instructions for the function. Okay, it's pointing there. Similarly, I can create some other functions as required, and let's just, using the function is quite easy, just call its name, meaning just write its name, square, and it has defined x as an input parameter, an argument, so we can put some numbers in there. It's going to give us a squared value. Let's do that again with some other values. Okay, 7 times 7, 49. How about 11? 121, yes, correct. Anyway, so forth. This will work for some other types of numbers as well. For example, 5.5. Okay, this gives me 30.25. Why? Because when a value gets inputted into a function, and if all the statements, the expressions can be calculated for the given type, then it will evaluate the expression using the given type. So how do we know which type of parameter we need to pass into a function? Well, in Python that can be a little bit ambiguous. In many languages other than Python, you have to specify the parameter type. That means I need to know exactly what type of parameter is going to be come in as an argument. But in Python, however, has this called duck typing, which means if it looks like a value that can be interpreted using the expressions, it will try to do it. Okay, so here's the saying: if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it's a duck, right? So if there are no errors by evaluating this type in a function, then it will do so. Okay. So in this case, if argument allows a multiplication, then it's okay. So integer has a multiplication, a float has a multiplication, and therefore it's okay. Okay. But if I put in some other things, it's going to give an error. So square, hello, this will give me an error, right? So we can't multiply a non-integer with string. Okay, that's the specific error for this one. So this one allows me to square ints and floats and anything that allows you to multiply the same type together. Just be wary about this, all right? Because Python will not check the type for you. You have to ensure that whatever people put in is the type that you're expecting. So you might have to do some extra checking where necessary. So here's another example doing the definition. Note multi-line body, all lines indented by the same amount, right? So this means it's going to execute line by itself and they belong to this particular function. So let's quickly write that in our function. Okay, so def Fahrenheit is going to take in degrees Celsius, 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees Fahrenheit equals 9.0 divided by 5.0 times degrees Celsius plus 32.0. So as you can see, we are putting it as an all a float type, because later, if the input degree is integer, it will still express it as a float, right? We don't necessarily have to put the zeros, point zeros, because this division will force it to be a float type regardless, but that's all right. Okay, and finally return degrees f. Okay, so now we have defined this function called Fahrenheit. Basically, you type in, you pass in the degree Celsius value, then this is going to convert it into Fahrenheit. Okay, so here's a bunch of statements. Try it yourself and see what you get. You can pause the video here. So once you have done it, we can quickly check. Well, actually, we don't have to check. You probably know the answer now. So Fahrenheit 0, this will convert the value. So if you just plug in 0 here, it's going to give us 32. Absolutely, yeah. But in the shell, it will show us 32.0 because the expression was in floats. Okay. So if we put in 100, we're going to get. I haven't tried it myself, so you have to try it. Okay, and also 451.0, same story. Okay, and lastly, if we input Fred, what do you get? What it's going to do is do 9 divided by 5, which gives me 1.8, multiply by Fred, and a float type does not have a multiplication to string, and therefore we will get that multiplication error. You can't multiply a string with a float. Okay, so let's just give it a quick check. Fahrenheit, oh, so hard to spell, of Fred equals, here we go, type error. You can't multiply sequence by a non-int of type float. Essentially, we can't multiply this here. This is the multiplication that it gets flagged with. Okay. Also note that this print is also a built-in function. If this was a program, then it's not going to show us directly on the shell. So we have created this in the shell, but let's just reset this. Oh, before we reset, let me copy. Restart shell, restart shell. So here now I don't have Fahrenheit function anymore because I reset the shell. That's the one thing about using the shell for programming. It does not save your states. Instead, let's just put it here and save this. I'll just save it here. I think I have a folder called random codes. Okay, like Python basics. Okay, so after you save this, I can run this. Here is the green button you can press, or you can also press Ctrl-Alt-V for short keys. So once I run this, what it does is it loads whatever inside here, and now you can access it from the shell. So if I check locals, I now have a function called Fahrenheit loaded in the shell, ready to go. So Fahrenheit 10, it's going to give me a number. Fahrenheit, Fred, whatever, it's also giving me some stuff. But the thing is, if I just run this in the shell, it gives me the numbers directly, but if it's interacting with other programs, it's not going to display to you. So if you want to display something, you should always use the print function. Okay, so in the shell, it's going to be the same, but in other programs, the value just gets used directly without being interpreted, without being displayed. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, local variables. So degree f is what we call a local variable. Here, degree f, this is degree f, because as you can see here, we have a bunch of built-in stuff, file, and then we have Fahrenheit. So in the shell, I actually don't have access to this variable called degrees f, because this degrees f belongs to this function Fahrenheit. So it's known within the function, but outside the function, we don't know what degrees f is. Okay, so local variables are specific to the function they are created in and cannot be accessed by other functions unless passed as parameters. Okay, so unless you either return it or it gets put into the function and then passed it back, you cannot access this parameter that belongs to the function only. Okay, therefore they no longer exist when you are finished with the function. They disappear. Okay, we say the scope of a local variable is the body of the function in which it is used. Okay, so that's the expression, but essentially what it's saying is that local variables belong to the function and cannot be accessed from outside. Scope is where a variable can be seen from. Alright, so understanding this far should be able to get you write up some simple codes and test it using the IDE. Okay, so give it a go. Next up is styles.